Welcome to the Patron Saints of Pop Culture Podcast. I'm Miguel Covarrubias.
And I'm Kathy Covarrubias. And today, let's talk about The Haunting of Hill House.
Spoiler alert for those of you who have not yet caught one of the best television shows to come out of Netflix in 2018. What else came out in 2018 for Netflix?
There was other things, but this is the only one that I watched recently that's been on my mind.
Yeah, well, we did talk about Glow.
That's true.
Yeah, and Glow did come out in 2018.
The Crown? Was The Crown Netflix?
I think so.
I watched it. It was good. I know you didn't watch it, but anyway.
Let's do our summary and review of the show. If you want to start.
Sure. Okay, so are we doing the summary first or the review?
Summary first.
The summary first. Okay. So a family of, we kind of go back and forth between times. So we see the family as they're younger, but we also see the family as they're older. They're going through the struggles of life while also going through the terrors of being haunted by ghosts.
All right. Let's see. A well-meaning father decides to buy this mansion for a good price and to flip it to gain some money. Little does he know, the house is incredibly haunted. And the show is about the ramifications for the family following that bad decision.
All right.
How's that for a summary?
Yeah, that pretty much sums it up.
Well, as people have been saying, This Is Us with ghosts.
Pretty much, yeah. Well, I would argue that it's almost better than that.
It's better than season 2 of This Is Us, that's for sure.
Yeah. There was a lot of, if you're listening at this point in time in our podcast and haven't realized that there's going to be spoilers anyway, there was definitely certain parts midway through the season while we were watching it where I was I did not see it coming.
Yeah. Well, we already did give the spoiler alert, so,
That's true. So if you're here at this point in time, it's totally your fault.
Yeah. Your review.
Okay, so as you can tell, since I've already kind of said it, I really liked it. It's not very often that I am thoroughly surprised by a plot twist. And I'm not just saying surprised by the jump scares, which there really aren't too many jump scares, which I'm very happy for because I hate jump scares a lot. I'm more of a suspenseful kind of spooky, that's kind of what I like, which is probably why I liked, episode 5?
Episode 5
no,
and episode
6. Episode 6 is the one where it's at the funeral parlor.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that episode because it's all done in one shot, and it just freaked me out. I know that there's going to be a ghost popping up the next time they move the camera. I just know it. I just don't know when it's going to happen. But anyway, so I really enjoyed it.
Well, and as I was saying while we were watching episode 6 was that they employed a lot of stage theater techniques into the filming, which as a stage actor, I really appreciated. I feel like not enough cinema, I guess you would call it, for both big screen and small screen.
Things on camera.
Things on camera. Not enough people actually employ those techniques, which I think are fantastic. You know that they had to rehearse that a few times to get it like he wanted it.
Well, and not just the actors had to rehearse it. I mean, the people behind the scenes, moving the props and, making sure everybody is on their marks. And it's a lot that has to go into that. So I loved it.
Props to them.
Props to them. Yes.
Pun intended. My review, I really liked it. I'm not a huge fan of horror by any means, but I watch it to humor you.
I know. I was about to say I basically have to bribe him.
But I really liked it, and I think it's in the vein of Stephen King, how it's always evolving. Stephen King is always evolving. I mean, you read some of his earlier works and then you read some of his later works and you're like, yeah, it's a completely different person. I think that what Mike Flanagan does for the horror genre, what Stephen King has done for storytelling in his books. And I think that's, I mean, high praise for me.
Yeah.
But I like so much so that like we watched this and I wanted to get more of this director. I wanted to get more of Mike Flanagan. In fact, I actually, when I was doing research for what we're going to talk about today, found out that Mike Flanagan was born and raised in Salem, Massachusetts. And I was just like, wow, that must have been weird that he became a horror director after that. You know,
I know,
the Salem
it's like,
witch trials.
Do you have to be from Salem? Like, really?
Yeah. And how much work he actually puts into his pieces. I admittedly, I did not watch Oculus or Ouija, both of his movies before he went to Netflix. But I was really excited to find out that he was picked by Stephen King to do Doctor Sleep, which, if you don't know about that, it's his follow-up to The Shining. By the way, read both the books. Watch the miniseries and not the Kubrick film. But that's on my own personal opinion. I like the miniseries better.
Yeah, I prefer the miniseries for sure.
And in fact, this would not be his first time with Stephen King. He actually directed Netflix's Gerald's Game, which is a Stephen King novel, with Carla Gugino. Just in case you didn't get enough of her either, you can go and watch that to get more of Mike Flanagan with Carla Gugino.
Yep. In fact, Mike Flanagan is known for keeping not only the same actors, but also working with the same crew as well, too, which is amazing. I mean, the fact that he I think it's easier because they already know what his vision is. Like, they already kind of like, okay, so this is the director that he likes to do this. So it's easier to direct those people. So I can kind of see why he keeps people around that he's already worked with. But that's neat because you don't really see that a lot in Hollywood. No,
and in fact, he's gotten a few of Steven Spielberg's crumbs. I don't know if you would call that, but the kid from E.T. is young Hugh. If you guys didn't know.
Yep.
Anyway, we're not going to talk about Mike Flanagan. I just needed to sing his praise a little bit because, like, this was one of the things about my own watching of the series that I just like. Wow, I'm blown away. There's not many things like that really inspire me to that point where I'm like, I have to get more.
Especially from a horror movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was very well. That's what I'm going to talk about. So that's kind of a good segue there. It's a very good, more interpersonal growth story, which this is what I mean by he does something brand new for the horror genre. Is that it's not just about the scares, it's about the growth.
Yeah.
And this is an interesting thing I found out about ghost stories last year. This last year in 2018, I actually was listening to a lot of the podcast Stuff to Blow Your Mind from the How Stuff Works network. I think that's what they're called. But in there, every Halloween, they do kind of ghost stories from around the world. And they did talk about how the ghost stories kind of evolved as part of human culture, is that they kind of reveal kind of the desires of a culture and about how silly they are to, our mortal concerns. How, like for instance, wealth and wealth accumulation can be one of those ghost stories. And in fact, that plays into one of our most well-known Western ghost stories. I mean, we watch it every year in the Muppet form.
The Christmas Carol.
Yes. So, I mean, that's a lot about what's more important about life is about the connection with your fellow human being and keeping Christmas the whole year round in your own way, in that it is to bring joy to your fellow brother. Sorry, I'm just trying to think of the song in my head from the Muppet Christmas Carol. But
basically, don't be a Grinch.
Don't be a Grinch. By the way, another thing that, every year we have to watch it because it's just the best version. Best Christmas movie ever.
Oh, sorry. For some reason, since I said The Grinch, I was thinking of The Grinch, and I'm like, what are you talking about? No, The Muppet Christmas Carol, definitely by far the top 10 Christmas movies.
Yeah. And
Anyway.
so in so doing, I think that Mike Flanagan draws on this, especially with the line that Nell quotes to the family in the last episode. She says, Mom, Olivia always told me that that a house is like a person. But I also want to kind of turn it on its head, is that a person is like a house as well. Is that we kind of have these walls, we have these rooms inside of ourselves that really reveal who we are and what it is we treasure. The things that we decide to put up on our walls on the inside, and the things that we curate to show other people are what we deem important. And what oftentimes happens is that we kind of fill our own houses with our ghosts, as it were. Mm-hmm. That we kind of allow ourselves to be haunted by ourselves. And this also pulls from the last episode where Steve is doing his exposition narrative at the end about how, he does it at the beginning too, in the first episode, where he talks about how ghosts are fear, ghosts are guilt and anger, and the things that we want to see. But at the end, he's kind of like, well, it's also all of those things that we deem not worthy of ourselves, and that they end up haunting us. And the things that we wish we could have done, regrets, the things that we should have done, or things that we should have said to each other. And I mean, there's so much of that. There's so much of that in our society now that we're just afraid of each other so much, or we're afraid of other people finding out about us. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? I feel like that's maybe just makes sense to myself, but I'm wondering, does that make sense?
So I'm going to repeat back, maybe in my own words, what I think you said.
Okay.
To see if that helped.
Yeah.
Okay. So from what I'm getting from what you're saying is that us as people will put up our own walls to hide away the things that we don't want other people to see, like the anger and the guilt and whatever thing we might deem unfavorable.
Yeah, exactly.
And then that way we can hide it away from other people, so then we are in a way protecting us, protecting them.
Yeah. And that's also what Steve brings up in that exposition part there, is he says that he built up walls around their relationship to protect them. In a sense, he was just walling himself off. He was walling himself off from his wife, which a lot of husbands tend to do. I've done it too, and walled you out at times. And I know that that's something that I'm still working on trying to undo in myself. And I think that's probably why, one of the reasons why I love this show so much, was that it taught me a lot about myself. Is learning about my ghosts and letting go of some of those things, and letting you in as a person, and so that was important to me. So if anyone can get this out to Mike Flanagan or the people out over at the Haunting of Hill House, just want to say thank you for that. So
I think that's another thing that I like about the show is you don't go away from it just being frightened or like, oh, that was a good scare, you come away from it with other things on your mind to think about, to kind of reflect on your own. Yeah,
you're scared and depressed, and, especially after episode 5.
Yeah,
Nell's finding out. Well, yeah, we already gave a spoiler alert, but finding out that Nell is the bent neck lady.
Ooh, yeah.
I mean, that one, like both of us, I know that night, neither of us slept very well that night because we were both like, I don't know what to do with this.
No, I mean, it's just so tragic. Like, and the whole entire show, the whole entire episode was like so like frightening to me. Like you could tell like she was going just deeper and deeper into like the abyss, and she was trying to claw her way out, but the psychiatrist or the therapist gave her bad advice, which they can do.
Well, and her therapist ended up, I think, helping her to build walls to put her family on the outside. And to go back to my metaphor here that I'm trying to build.
Wait, her first therapist or the
bad one, the one
that told her, "Hey, you should go to the house."
Yeah, and that told her, "Hey, you should confront your brother."
Yeah.
Or that she thought that he was saying.
Yeah. Yeah. I just lost track of what we were talking about.
About how how the therapist was helping her to build the walls to keep other people out. That that she was the one that, or that the therapist was the one that was helping her to protect herself in the wrong way.
Yeah, yeah. Which also goes to show another thing that you should learn from this series: if your therapist isn't working out for you, if you feel like your therapist is giving you bad advice, it's okay to find another therapist. You got to find somebody who's gonna, jive with you and get you on the right track.
Yeah.
Side note. That was my extra tidbit for life.
Well, yeah, tidbit that a therapist that will help you build the right kind of walls.
Well, if you need to have walls too.
Yeah, if you need to, proper boundaries, I should put it.
Yes.
We'll say fences.
Fences where
because that's outside the house.
Yeah. Talking about fences, which are kind of like walls. Back to walls. Sorry, our segue. We thought we had something planned out, and it didn't happen.
I kept trying to build it up there for you, like a building of a wall.
Yeah, but then he switches to fences, and then what am I supposed to do with that?
Yeah, sorry.
Anyway. Well, with those walls, sometimes we can, unfortunately, build walls for other people, which typically ends in disaster or doesn't end very well. What I'm specifically talking about is the parents in this series are trying to shelter and put walls around their children. And I'm not just talking about Olivia, but I'm also talking about the Dudleys and another person as well too, but I don't want to say because it's just really a quick thing, so I'm going to save that until the end. But anyway, many of the characters that are parents, I mean, they're just like any other parent in real life. They're trying to do their best for their child. I mean, they're trying to make sure that what they're doing is going to be beneficial for their kid.
Yeah.
And even though I don't necessarily agree on all parenting styles or things that parents do like for or to their children, I can still appreciate the fact that they're doing what they're doing for the most part because they think it's what's best for their kid.
Yeah.
But in this series, unfortunately, their way of trying to help their kids is just making things worse. I think part of that is because as parents, we sometimes get so consumed by protecting our kids that it backfires, and it's kind of hard to see what the possible consequences could be because we're so scared of the other outcomes. For example, was it back in the 80s? There was some high-profile kidnapping cases, which then led to a whole parenting shift of instead of allowing your kids to kind of like wander the streets with their friends, like you had to know where your kids were at all times. They always had to be checking in. They had like smaller boundaries. You had to constantly know where they were, which in reality, kidnappings aren't that prevalent as we think they are. We feel like they are because we have social media and we have the news that are like constantly in our faces. So it feels like it's more upfront. But in reality, kidnappings actually aren't happening anymore, like frequency-wise, than they were like decades ago, even when our parents were kids.
Oh, no. And surprisingly, even though that we live in very strange times, as it were, that things are actually much less violent and much less traumatic
Yeah.
as they once were. I don't know if that's the right word to say, but I think that now because of those things, that it makes those who are wanting to do such things much more hesitant about doing them.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, for example, when I was a kid, I think what helped was my mom, when I was younger, was considered like the older mom, I guess. Because she had me when she was like in her late 20s, and most of the kids in my grade, their parents were about like 5 to 10 years younger than my mom. And so she would let me do a little bit more things that other parents wouldn't, you know? So like I pretty much was like kicked out of the house like when the sun rose. Like I would eat breakfast and then I was thrown outside. Well, really, I could come in whenever I wanted to, but I just like hung outside and played with my friends in the neighborhood, and I had like certain boundaries that I had to like follow along. Of course, as a kid, I would sometimes break them and go a little bit further than I typically was supposed to, but I mean, I still stayed relatively in the same area. Whereas I had a few friends where like they couldn't leave their yard.
Yeah.
Period. At all. Not even with like a big group of friends. Like they had to stay in the yard. They had to know, their parents had to know where they were at all times. And I can tell you specifically one friend, she very much still relies on her parents to like know what to do as an adult now. So in a way, their overprotectiveness of her has backfired because now she has a hard time, I guess, functioning as an adult.
Well, yeah, and I think that you see this a lot in the show. I mean, I can imagine what Abigail would be like if she grew up to be an adult. Exactly.
And there's a couple of different reasons why a lot of these parents do what they do. One thing that comes to mind, especially when it comes to like Olivia, what she did is kind of reminiscent to a lot of women and moms who suffer from postpartum depression. A lot of the times the moms feel hopeless and they feel as though like this world is just going to devour their child, and there's no way that they can protect their children. So that's where you hear the stories of moms killing all of their children. It's usually because the mom like had this immense sense of dread that their kids are going to be hurt in the outside world. So their weird, twisted way of protecting them is to kill them.
Yeah.
Which in Olivia's case, that's exactly what she did. She feared for her children, and so she tried to kill them. And then inadvertently, accidentally killed the Dudleys.
Abigail,
yep. And then the Dudleys, too, I mean, also they had what they did as well was very well-meaning. You know, they had a reason for why they kept Abigail hidden away from society, partly because of the house. But unfortunately, because of that, you know, Abigail got a little curious. You know, she saw other kids her age and decided that she was going to, you know, introduce herself, which is fine. I mean, that's what kids do, you know, you know, so, I mean, that's something you could totally expect a child to do. But the Dudleys, I think, by their fear of what happened from their previous child, the fact that they had a miscarriage, just kind of really honed in on their overprotectiveness of Abigail, which definitely backfired because she felt like she had to sneak out of the house in order to sleep over, which then resulted in them not knowing where she was and then her being murdered.
Worst sleepover ever.
Yes, yeah, for sure. And then we get Steve, which I know you guys are like, but Steve's not a parent. You're right. Well, he is a parent at the very, very end.
Can I just say the morphing into zombie Lee, like in that episode?
That was
like,
weird.
Zombie pregnant lady. That was like just frightening imagery right there.
Yeah, no, I agree. I had to close my eyes because I was like, oh, nope, I'm not going to see this. No, thank you. But with Steve, he, in a way, is also like protecting his future kids by having the vasectomy.
Yeah.
Because in his mind, what his mom had was a product of her genetics And so he was trying to protect his future children by just making it to where they don't exist. Which, it is true that a lot of mental illness is genetic. But what Steve didn't realize is that if you already know what a possibility could be when it comes to mental illness, you can help better prepare your child in case it does happen.
Yeah.
Which is more important, I think, in my opinion.
Well, and yeah, and I have to say that, I really resonated with Steve, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit, but with that is that I know that with me, with my generalized anxiety disorder, and with the other issues that I deal with, that I'm absolutely terrified. Being a father is that I'm passing that on to my children, and knowing that trying to give your children the best coping skills for those things, I think, is a much better way of going about that, rather than just not having kids. If you want to have kids, have kids.
Well, no, we should also say if you don't want to have kids.
Yeah, if you don't want to have kids, don't have kids. And be honest about it.
Yeah. And
don't start trying with your spouse.
Yeah, don't have a vasectomy.
A secret vasectomy.
Oh, yeah. I'm so mad.
We're also we don't advocate for Good Mythical Morning's version of doing that, is going on camera and filming the vasectomy.
Oh my gosh, no.
With your best friend and putting it on YouTube for the world to watch.
Yeah, that was just awkward and weird, but whatever. They got the views. They got what they wanted, right?
Yeah.
But, and same with me too. Like, I grew up knowing that in my family, there is a lot of people who have had to deal with substance abuse. Mm-hmm. And so I, unfortunately, had to use the internet to, learn about different ways to help kind of prevent myself and, protect myself from doing that. And not just, the obvious, don't do drugs. Because I'm an adult, I like to have the occasional alcoholic beverage. So what I've done is just learned different things that I have to follow in order to make sure that I don't become an addict. Don't drink when you're, excessively sad or anxious. Limit the amount that you drink. Don't binge, that kind of stuff. So,
well, don't use it as a coping mechanism.
Yeah.
And that's something that Luke ended up turning to was drugs as a coping mechanism. And that's something that both you and Olivia, I think Olivia really ended up causing in him.
Yeah.
Well, if you you watch your friend, your childhood friend, get killed by your mother by rat poison,
it's pretty traumatic.
Yeah. And the only people who are there are your twin, and nobody really believes you about this girl being real.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So, where do we go from here?
So, like we had mentioned last week, our format has changed. So, we're going to ask you the questions. What do you want us to talk about in part 2 for this? We have a lot of stuff that we can talk about. We're wanting to do a character breakdown, really kind of go into depth. Like I said, I really resonated with Steve. There were some parts of Luke that I resonated with. But there are some theories out there which really kind of piqued my interest a little bit, that they represent the 7 deadly sins. Mm-hmm. Of course, that's not really. It's a little bit of a stretch, I think, for that one.
Yeah, it's kind of a stretch. But if you want to talk about it, we'll put something together for you.
Yeah, we'll find some stuff for you. Of course, the stages of grief, but we're not going to talk about that again. We already talked about that way back in our episode about the OA, mm-hmm. And that's all the way back in season 1. That's our second or third episode ever. Yeah. So,
well, we've talked about grief many times anyway.
Almost a lot of the things that we watch are about grief.
So, I guess us as a society, just generally speaking, needs to have better coping mechanisms in terms of how they're going to deal with grief, because everybody's going to know somebody who dies eventually. So,
or even just the character arcs of each of the characters,
mm-hmm.
how they grew as people, which is a great thing. Like Shirley was way closed off in the entire series. She built her walls. Yeah, she built her walls up like really like, and we found out, it's because she had a lot to hide, and she was afraid of losing everything, losing her family and everything else like that. But that's a great character arc there to talk about as well. Also, if there are any other fan theories out there, like that the mold, the ghosts aren't real, or like the mold is like an alien that's and it is consuming them from the house.
Ooh, that's interesting.
There's other fan theories out there, but anyway, let us know what you want us to talk about in episode 2. If you don't, then we're just going to talk about what we want to talk about.
Yeah, we'll just pick something. But we are going to give you some time to, shoot us a message, because we know that not everybody listens to episodes right away. So if you want to get a hold of us and give us your input about what you want us to talk about, please let us know by January 20th, 2019, just in case you're listening to this way in the future. So if you're listening to this in the future, I'm sorry.
If you're listening to this in the future, let us know what you think of season 2 of The Haunting of Hill House, or Dr. Sleep, or other Mike Flanagan things that may come out in the future.
So you can reach us at Instagram now. We have an Instagram, which is something we didn't have before. We are at Patron Saints of Pop Culture, because that's who we are. You can also find us at Facebook and Twitter at Real Honest Faith. Also, of course, there's just the Plain Jane website. Well, it's actually not that plain and not that Jane, but I mean, we also have a website, and that's thehonestfaith.com. So you can message us there as well.
And again, just let us know by January 20th some of the things that you would like to talk about. So that you can actually, like we say at the end, like I say at the end of every podcast episode, come and join the conversation.
Bye.